Welcome to Inner Swim, a space for anyone called to tune within. If you're intuitive, creative, a deep feeler, earth lover, or a sensitive soul, you'll feel right at home here. I'm Jaylin, a wellness mentor and yoga teacher supporting women to reconnect with their inner truth, root into their authentic energy, and live in harmony with their nature. So let's pour a tea and dive in. I'm so glad you're here. Hey friends, and welcome back to the podcast. So today we're talking about PMS, or premenstrual syndrome, as something that many women experience, but I'd like to reframe it a little bit in today's talk and offer a gentler way to understand and to tend to yourself in the premenstrual phase. So let's just take a moment to sigh and breathe. Let's enjoy a big breath in and out. So let me start by saying PMS, or premenstrual syndrome, has a big cultural story around it. And I'd like to reframe that story. So the norm, the cultural story, is that if we're experiencing PMS, it's inconvenient, it's hard to deal with, it makes us more irrational and less trustworthy. And all of this kind of points to this idea that PMS means there's something wrong, there's a flaw. So my reframe is that premenstrual syndrome is not actually a syndrome. There is nothing wrong. In fact, there's a deep wisdom coming through in the premenstrual phase of the cycle. And so these symptoms that we experience, like maybe irritability, increased sensitivity, these very real symptoms that we experience do not add up to a syndrome, but in fact they are the inner wisdom of the person signaling them to a threshold, to a transition from a more outwardly focused awareness toward a more inwardly focused awareness. So again, some of these symptoms could include irritability, fatigue, wanting to slow down and needing more comfort, needing more space, feeling more sensitized to noise and busyness. So this does not sound like a syndrome. These sound like a signal from a natural, living, and responsive being, which is you. So in the premenstrual phase of the cycle, hormones dip, especially estrogen, and progesterone rises. Progesterone is known as the nesting hormone. So physiologically and biologically, we are called to find more rest, to find more comfort. The nervous system can become more sensitive in this phase. And so all of this is pointing us to a more inwardly drawn focus. So what's really the issue with the old PMS cultural story, that it's a syndrome, that it's a flaw, that it's something that we need to fix or deal with about ourselves? The issue is not in the symptoms that we're experiencing. The issue is in a culture that doesn't naturally support spaces for rest and spaces for inwardly drawn attention, time to slow the pace. But the good news is that we, as individuals, can hear the signs from our inner wisdom and our body, and we have the power to cultivate and create our own environment, at least as far as we are bound within our own skin. We can create our own environment, or at least cultivate an inner environment that is respectful of our current energetic state, that is curious rather than critical, that is compassionate rather than condemning, and that is present rather than pathologizing. So we can sum all of this up to just being willing to listen to oneself, to honor oneself, and to be willing to again hold space for oneself in any way that we can. So this might look like more sleep, having a slower day, or at least a slower part of your day. This could look like gentler workouts, gentler movement practices if you exercise, and maybe having more boundaries with other people. Maybe saying no more often in this phase. So basically, the symptoms that we experience, the irritability, the increased sensitivity that leads to overwhelm, these symptoms are exacerbated when we resist the call within and when we resist the call to rest more. So PMS, rather than a syndrome, is a call to rest. It's just a call from the body to lead you toward taking more nourishment, to replenishing your energy stores. It's not something wrong with you that you need to punish yourself about or just power through. Premenstrual symptoms, let's call them, often worsen when we push through them, when we ignore them. It's the pushing through and the ignoring our needs that creates the symptoms in the first place. And so if we continue to ignore them and push through them, they're only going to get worse. They also worsen if we just expect ourselves to keep the same pace that we've had all month long. I mean, this goes for all living beings. If we take a look at the 4 seasons of nature, or even the day to night cycles, there is a time to be doing and there's a time to be resting and being. That's encoded in all life cycles, and your internal world is no different. These symptoms worsen when we override our body's cues. So again, this might look like in our day-to-day life, saying yes to a social event when you really just want to stay home in this phase. It could look like forcing yourself to be productive even though your energy is through the floorboards. So these are ways that we ignore and override what we need in order to fit ourselves into some cultural story, in order to fit ourselves into some expectation that is usually external, and maybe so much so we feel that pressure so much so externally that it starts to become internalized. We start to punish and condemn ourselves because we've adopted the cultural story. So all of this is what creates the friction, and this is the syndrome. What premenstrual syndrome is to me is ignoring the body's needs in a culture that encourages us to do so. So here are some signs that you're actually overdue for rest. I recently released a podcast episode listing some signs that you're in need of some high quality rest. So feel free to listen to that. But here are some quick signs. So heightened emotional sensitivity. So this could look like, feeling more defensive, feeling more weepy or quick to cry. These are all signs that your emotions are sensitized and they could use a little tending. They could use a little of your presence. You could use a little of your presence. So again, maybe you have high irritability or a lower frustration tolerance. You're getting frustrated and irritated at little things that usually in other phases of your cycle don't bother you. Fatigue or brain fog. So if your cognitive function is dipping, then this is a sign that you could use a little reset. You could use some nervous system down-regulating or quieting of the mind and the body-mind. So an embodied feeling of just wanting to cocoon, wrap yourself up, withdraw a little bit, or maybe take a little more time to just pay attention to what you're feeling inside. Maybe you're feeling some creative bursts or intuitive feelings and messages. Dreams even can crop up here and get a little stronger. A general craving for slowness, softness, and more spaces of silence. So these are all some signs that your body mind is calling you, your inner wisdom is calling you to rest. Now, rest doesn't just mean sleep, but it could mean going to bed a little bit earlier if you feel that call. It can mean lightening your schedule as far as is possible for yourself. It can mean meals that feel more warming and simple, simplifying your day. It could mean practicing things like yoga nidra or yin yoga, restorative yoga, instead of doing powerlifting. It could mean saying no and canceling things that you just don't feel up for. It could mean taking just 20 minutes a day to just be with yourself, shut the door or go for a little walk. So it doesn't mean you have to retreat for a full week. Often taking those 1% shifts in our lives creates beautiful transformation, and it communicates safety and presence to ourselves. So honoring your rest in this phase will reduce your symptoms. And if not right away, then over time, by just honoring this shift in pace and the shift in energy at this place in your cycle, will lessen your symptoms. And if they're really deeply embedded symptoms, if you're even experiencing, depression, anxiety, then seek out support. Seek out support where you can. But these more light symptoms that we're talking about, the irritability, the gentle cramps, the emotionality, the feeling of just feeling tired and maybe a little bit burnt out, these are not signs that you're broken. And these symptoms, when you choose to hear them, these pain points can actually be keys and clues to your power. So you can shift from, I am broken and something's wrong with me because I don't fit in this society, in this culture right now. Shift that from, I am wise and my body is wise. And I am free to honor this shift, and I'm committed to honoring my inner nature. So, loves, the next time these symptoms crop up, just try meeting it with curiosity. Maybe that's the whole thing, just being aware and curious rather than critical. This is not something that you need to fix about yourself. Your body is not turning on you. It's simply speaking to you. And if you honor your cyclical rhythm through your whole cycle, not just in this phase, but through the whole cycle, you will notice your presence deepening with yourself and overall just greater inner harmony. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I do have some resources on my website, innerswim.com. I'll leave a link down below if you'd like to dive deeper into some of these practices I'm talking about, like yoga nidra, or maybe you want to go really deep with one-on-one sessions for menstruality and honoring the wisdom of your cycle. I also have blog posts and more resources on the website, so I'll leave a link down below. Again, thank you for listening to this. Thank you for choosing to honor yourself in a world that, if you ask me, is just genuinely confused about cyclicity and inner harmony. And that's not our fault. We don't have to fix society. We don't have to fix this culture that we're in, but we can choose to create our worlds from the inside out. And I think that's where our true power lies. So wherever you're at in your cycle and in the world, I bow to you. I'm very grateful for you being here. And until next time, be well.